Good morning. I'm going to finish up with video 3 on chapter 12 and talk about some non-Mendelian inheritance that differs from the rules proposed by Gregor Mendel. Yes, Mendel was not 100% correct. Maybe you could consider his work to be fairly good for the garden pea plant, but for other organisms, not so much. He was not correct about his rule of dominance. In some cases, there is not complete dominance. In some conditions, both alleles are expressed, and that's called codominance. And in some cases, you do have blending. That's referred to as incomplete dominance. Gene linkage, which is the next slide, doesn't really support the concept of independent assortment. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. There are conditions where one gene is not responsible for one trait. There are many genes often responsible for one trait. There are often one gene can be responsible for many traits, and many genes might be responsible for one trait. So there's variation there, and there's also the effect that the environment has on the genotype. So think about the Barton Fitness program, how lifestyle can influence gene expression in the human body. So gene linkage. Of the 7 traits that Mendel examined with the pea plant, none of them were linked. They were all on separate chromosomes. So gene linkage is the tendency of alleles that are located closely together on a chromosome to also be inherited together. That's called gene linkage. So if 2 genes or alleles, 2 different ones, are on the same chromosome and they're closely located on that chromosome, they are called linked. And it's possible then for them to be inherited together. That does not support independent assortment. So independent assortment would not be valid in some cases due to gene linkage. In the middle example, if gene 1 and 2 are on separate non-homologous chromosomes, then they're not linked, and independent assortment would be correct for those 2 genes. And in the third example in the lower right, if gene 1 and 2 are potentially on the same chromosome, but they're separated by a fairly large distance on that chromosome, then they would not be linked also, and independent assortment would hold. So gene linkage is an exception to independent assortment. Incomplete and codominance are exceptions to Mendel's law of dominance. With incomplete dominance, you have a blend in the first generation from the 2 parents. So red and white flowers as parents produce pink offspring. A red and white horse produce a rowan. Incomplete dominance is kind of analogous to saying blending. The F1 offspring are intermediate in their phenotype from both of their parents. A blue and yellow parakeet produce green offspring, a blend of characteristics. Codominance is when you have both characteristics of the parents exhibited in their offspring. So you have red and white camellias and red and white zinnias. You have a brown and white Appaloosa horse, and you have a brown and white rowan cow. So if both allele products are expressed, you have codominance. If you have a blend of the two parental characteristics, that is referred to as incomplete dominance. So these are exceptions to Mendel's law of dominance. Codominance here is illustrated in the camellia. If you were to breed two codominant red and white camellias, the likelihood of their offspring being codominant is 50%. The likelihood of them having red flowers is 25%, and the likelihood of them having white flowers is 25%. The ABO blood typing system in a lot of mammals is also an example of codominance, in that the A and B alleles are both codominant. So there is a type AB blood system. Type O blood is recessive, and you have to have two recessive alleles to have type O blood. Oftentimes, if you have something such as the ABO blood type, you have multiple alleles, you have multiple phenotypes. Pleiotropy is an example of one pair of alleles having an influence on many traits. Sickle cell anemia is involved with one pair of alleles for the production of hemoglobin, and having the recessive condition and producing abnormal hemoglobin can have a multitude of effects on the human body. Marfan's syndrome results in weakened connective tissue and results in a multitude of effects to the human body, one of which is an increased likelihood for an aneurysm to develop in one of the arteries, such as the aorta, right above the heart. So pleiotropy is when one set of alleles has an effect on several phenotypic characteristics. Epistasis is an exception to Mendel, in that there are often two different alleles responsible for one phenotype. So the coat color of mammals, such as the Labrador retrievers, the shape of the comb on top of the chicken's head is an example of epistasis as well. Again, with two or a dihybrid situation, Mendel's expected ratio would be 9 to 3 to 3 to 1 in the second generation. And for the example of the Labrador retrievers, the ratio is 9 to 3 to 4, 9 black, 3 chocolate, and 4 yellow. So epistasis results in an F2 ratio that's not 9 to 3 to 3 to 1. It's a different number. Let's say a 9 to 7. It could be 12 to 4. It could be 12 to 3 to 1. It's some other ratio than 9, 3, 3, 1. The environment can have a major impact on the expression of the genotype. Often, the environment can result in phenotypic plasticity, where the traits of an organism vary based upon the environment the organism lives within. The example of the dandelion shows that the shape of the leaves, the orientation of the leaves, the length of the flowers, the flowering time, all vary based upon the environment that the dandelion grows within. The Himalayan rabbit in the top right has a white body and its extremities have black hair. The extremities are the coldest parts of its body, and the black hair is due to an enzyme called tyrosinase that's responsible for producing melanin, the blackish pigment in those regions where the body is black in the rabbit, the nose, the ears, the feet, and the tail. What you see with the blue that's strapped on the back of the rabbit is an ice pack, and the ice pack cools the skin of the rabbit and actually turns on the enzyme tyrosinase to deposit melanin in that region of the body. So on the right picture you see the rabbit with a black square of hair due to the cold ice pack placed upon its back. So environment can influence the expression of genes and thus can influence the phenotype of an organism. And lastly, there are some traits that show continuous variation, and it is assumed that those traits are due to the expression of many, perhaps hundreds of alleles. And that tends to be the thinking toward human inheritance, is that most of our traits are due to polygenic inheritance. Height, weight, skin color, eye color, etc. are due to many alleles that all work together and provide a level of variation where you can't really say there's anything that's really black or white. It's just some continuous variation on some scale. So in the example, you see male and female students from a biology class at the University of Florida, just indicating this bell-shaped distribution of height. So these were some examples of some exceptions to Mendel's rules of inheritance, and maybe this provides you with a little bit of insight into how traits might be inherited. In the next and last chapter for the semester, we'll talk a little bit about human inheritance and some of the ways that certain traits are inherited within us. So I hope you enjoy. Y'all take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.